Welcome to the podcast, Young in Love.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Young in Love podcast. This is your favorite host, Kezia Vilawa. On today's episode, we have a very special guest, a national hero, someone who's put his life out there for us. And I think it's a big honor that we have him today on the podcast. Now, you probably already know him for something, but we're not going to be talking about politics. We're not going to be talking about any of the stuff that you already know him for, investigative journalism and all of that. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about a part of him that is not so much out there. I know that he has hinted on this aspect of him in his book, Breaking Point. So if you've read it, you already know what I'm talking about. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend that you purchase the book and you read it. But today we're going to be hearing from the horse's mouth. We're not going to be reading from him. We're going to be hearing from him about a part of his life that's not so, out there. So welcome, David. It's good to have you. Okay, so let's just delve right into it. Something that stood out to me in the Breaking Point, one thing was when you talked about your first marriage. I noticed that you didn't like dwell so much on it. You started from the end. So tell me about this first marriage.
Okay, so I guess the most important thing that I have to say about it is that it shouldn't have happened. Not because either of us we're bad people or anything, but first of all, we're way too young.
How young?
When we met, she was 20, I was 23. When we got married, she was 22, I was 25.
Okay.
I think a 22-year-old in the world of today doesn't really have any business getting married.
Okay.
Yeah, I think at that age.
What about a 25-year-old?
Arguably, as you know, I've had a very interesting life. So, fortunately or unfortunately, I've had to sort of mature quicker than, people in my age group generally. But I would still say in some important respects, perhaps I was still quite immature. There's certain things I hadn't figured out yet. So, from my end, I guess one of the major things I hadn't figured out was that people are capable of showing you what you need to see for an extended period of time because they want something from you. Mm-hmm. And then once they've got it, or once you're not needed anymore, you see a side of them that you've never seen before. Okay. And it was just, and it completely rocked me at the time because, bear in mind, we met, it was a very very sappy kind of love story thing. So we met in NYC camp.
Okay.
So let me paint a picture for you. So I've just come back from the UK. So I went to school in the UK. I worked for a couple of years, KPMG, the Red Group. Mm-hmm. I've just come back to Nigeria to sort of restart my career because things weren't working out for me in the UK. And so I've come back March. And this is June, and I'm on the bus on the way to camp in Ekiti State. Mm-hmm. My dad was actually supposed to drop me off, but at the last minute he was like, "No, you just use public transport." And I saw it as an adventure, so I did. And this, pretty young thing comes into the bus, and me being a Lagos boy that doesn't carry last, strike up conversation, and one thing leads to another very, 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 very quickly. So in the space of 3 weeks, because NYC camp is 3 weeks.
Yes.
In the space of 3 weeks, we go from total strangers to
lovers,
picking out names for our kids, basically. That's not even an exaggeration. It moved really, really fast. There were, some other things that happened as well. As I said, she was very young. She was 20. So even in terms of certain experiences, those hadn't been had yet. I'm not going to specify what those experiences are, but I'm sure you can infer I'm sure you can guess what I'm inferring. And Yeah, that all happened. So then we obviously started youth service. We actually lived together that year.
Did you work together as well, the same PPA?
No, we didn't. But we actually, so my PPA was in the state capital, which is Ado-Ekiti. Hers was in a place called, I forget the name of the place, but it was, so we stayed sort of in the middle, in a place called Ifaki. So that, because it was like equidistant to both places. And during the course of that year, I had a serious falling out with my parents, shock, gasp, because, my whole life has been a story of me having serious, a series of, fights with family. So,
was it because of your girlfriend at the time?
Oh no! Okay. It was a religious dispute. Because that's where most of it stems from. I guess we're gonna talk about this in the course of the episode. My parents were Jehovah's Witnesses, and I wasn't, and that caused a lot of problems because the religion, it's not a religion, it's a cult. When you leave, the people in there are not allowed to speak to you. Okay. Including your family members.
You mentioned that.
So that's a problem. So we weren't on good terms, and consequently, things were not really going well with me in many ways, but especially financially, right? And we're living together, and I guess the superhero that she met wasn't really superheroing again. You understand? Because again, we met under a very specific set of circumstances, a very specific context where so I'll give you an example. In camp, the camp commandant, he was a guy called Lieutenant Colonel Gold. I have no idea if he's still alive now. This guy was basically trying to bully her into sort of sleeping with him. Like, he literally gave her an instruction that she should report to his quarters or some shit like that. And I was there.
In the orientation camp.
In the orientation camp, yeah. I bear in mind, this is this small, wispy 20-year-old, and this is guys, huge lieutenant colonel, whatever, the most senior army officer in the camp. And I basically had to do something I wouldn't normally do and pull rank.
As a superhero that...
Yeah, I made calls.
Okay.
You understand? Things I don't normally do, getting, my dad involved and all that kind of shit. Yeah. I did that. And certain calls were made. And then eventually he realized that somebody has reached somewhere high, higher above in the and he didn't like me for that. So that was how she knew me. I was the guy who fixes things, who solves problems. And then in the course of that year, I wasn't that guy anymore.
Right.
And I guess the image of me just sort of fell off a cliff. And long story short, she ended up cheating on me.
So, but at what point did you decide you were going to get married? Was it after the NYSC, during, or? So,
after the NYSC, we to be honest, that relationship shouldn't have survived the NYSC. Like, the minute I discovered she was cheating, which, by the way, she didn't tell me, I discovered...
Before you were married? Or?
Yeah, before. Okay. This was during NYSC, during that year. Like, a couple of months to the end of service was when I discovered that she was...
I'm sorry, you discovered she was cheating, but you still went ahead to marry her.
I'm going to land. So one thing one recurring thing you're gonna find out in this conversation is that I am a disgustingly sentimental person. That's a side of me that most people will never see, because most people will only see the fighter, because that's the character I had to create to survive in Nigeria's public space. But those who know me personally, Jesus Christ, I'm absolutely hopeless, right? So that happened. So we got back to Lagos. That relationship really shouldn't have survived Ekiti, but we got back to Lagos, and we were still together. So I remember this was 2014. I got into a helicopter cadet pilot program. So I was going to become a pilot. So it was a company called Atlantic Aviation. So they had a couple of oil transport contracts, I think with Total. They were in a growth phase. And back then there was this thing, local content. Yeah. Basically in the Nigerian oil industry, every participant had to have a certain quota of
indigenous people,
So if you're a helicopter company, you can't just bring in a bunch of foreign pilots. Right. You have to have a cadet program, which is why Bristol had one. So these guys are coming in and they had a cadet program. So they wanted 12 pilots, trainee pilots. So they did this whole recruitment thing. I think they got like 6,000 applications, and then there were like 6 rounds of the process, and I made it through all the 6 rounds, and I was on the final 12. So I did my NCAA medical. I got measured for my pilot uniform and everything. We were going to go to Bristol Academy in Titusville, Florida, to get our CPL.
Like a license.
Yeah, and do our type ratings. And then Buhari happened, early 2015. As soon as Buhari hadn't even won the election yet, but as soon as it was becoming clear that he was going to win the election, everything froze. And long story short, it just never happened.
Okay.
So during that period when I thought I was going off to Florida, my mom, then, because my mom knew of me, and my mom had actually met me a couple of times. Then my mom was like, I want to meet this guy, we need to have a sit down. Because if you're going to go to America, and my daughter is here, then we need to know what we're doing.
Yep.
So you can't just leave my daughter and then, be telling her I'm coming.
Yeah.
You have to do something. You know what do something means
Yep.
in the Nigerian context.
That was some sort of subtle pressure.
It wasn't subtle at all.
Oh, okay.
It was as subtle as a hammer to the head.
Okay.
There was nothing subtle about it. she did not do subtlety. So we met for the first, officially. I remember it was a Palms shopping complex in VI. That was late 2014. And she said, what are your intentions for my daughter?
Right.
No one had ever asked me that question before, so I had to give an answer. And the only acceptable answer in the context of a Nigerian parent asking that question is how to marry a daughter. You understand?
Nigerian mother.
Exactly.
Especially.
You can't tell her, we're just together.
Let's see how it goes.
Exactly. She doesn't want it. That doesn't work. So, yeah. So that was basically it. It wasn't our idea. It wasn't her idea. It wasn't my idea. It was her mom's idea.
Okay.
To get married that early.
So when the license thing didn't work, the pilot program did not work, then you had no choice. Perhaps if it worked, you would have been in Florida and maybe an excuse for that not to happen.
Probably not. Probably I would. Again, I'm a very sentimental person, so probably I would have been like, I have someone waiting for me at home, So
I see.
That's probably what would have happened. So, but the pilot thing didn't work out, which still pisses me off till today, by the way.
So, but how long were you married to this person?
So the actual wedding was in November 2015. Okay. So between January and October 2015, there were a lot of things happening in my personal life. So I moved out of my parents' house. One thing, that was a major thing. That was a major shift. I got confirmed at work because I had a job then. I was working in PR. I was working at an agency called BHM. So I got confirmed, and back then the exchange rate was in a different world to what it is now. So when I tell people now that my first salary after getting confirmed was 160,000 naira a month, that doesn't sound like money now. But then that was a significant.
With the rate of poverty now, that's money.
Then that was about $800 a month. So $800 a month now is like 1 million naira thereabouts. So if someone tells you they make $1 million naira a month, you'd be like, oh, okay, not bad. That's how much I was making then.
Yeah.
So it was cool. I rented an apartment. I mean, it wasn't in VI or something. It was in Bariga.
Okay.
But the nicer part of Bariga, close to Third Mainland Bridge. It was a 2-bedroom apartment. It was really big. Furnished it well. We had a pretty good life. So we actually moved in together before we got married. Funny story. Because her family was having a bit of an accommodation issue, and getting to work was becoming an issue for her every day because they were in a place that was really difficult to get to. So she moved in with me, and then a few weeks later we were like, okay, you know what? Even if we can't do the whole big budget thing, let's just do some sort of wedding. Yeah. So we had, I remember, I think it was November 28th, 2015 was when we did the wedding. It was a very, I don't think the budget for the whole thing exceeded 700k or something. It was a very, 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 there were 20 people in attendance. It was very low.
You should write a book on how to marry on a budget.
I should not.
If you're able to pull that off with just 700.
No, I should not. But anyway, so that happened and we moved in. Now, things might have been different were it not for the fact that, again, sometimes the background you come from and the family you come from sometimes doesn't really give you a chance. So a lot of my story has been about me breaking out of the boundaries that were set for me by my background. But not everybody thinks that way. Not everybody understands that on some level, when you get to a certain age, you have to consciously rebel.
Especially if you don't agree.
Or that you even have to develop your own thoughts. You know, many people, I guess because it was easy for me because for example, I didn't really have a relationship with my mother. We grew up together.
Yeah, we're coming.
Yeah,
coming
we grew up together. She's still alive. But I haven't spoken to her in 7 or 8 years. We have no relationship whatsoever. We've never had a relationship, actually. She never showed. I can't prove it, but I suspect that she suffered from some sort of undiagnosed postpartum depression. Because all through as far as I can remember when I was a child, she never showed any affection whatsoever. She was always
You're the first child.
No, I was the fourth.
Okay.
Quintessential middle child. But apparently postpartum depression is more prevalent when women give birth to male children. And as long as I can remember, she's always been this sort of dull, sullen, permanently angry person like this with no real reason to be angry. So I guess for me it was easy to break out of or to break away from where I was coming from because I could tell that something was wrong.
Yeah.
But if you're coming from a fairly stable family where you guys are a tight unit, maybe you don't feel like you need to break out of anything. Maybe you feel like everyone there knows what they're talking about.
Right.
Maybe you feel like everything they say is true or it's in your best interest. So in her case, I think that's what the issue was. And I guess that also ties into age. Because again, she was very young. When you're very young, you're very impressionable.
When you say how young?
She was 22 when we got married. So there were two major problems right after we got married. First of all, we never had each other to each other. We never had ourselves. Like, we had this nice 2-bedroom apartment, we had a whole life, we had a car, but we were never able to enjoy our things ourselves.
There were influences.
Because primarily our family. So say we moved in together in November 2015. By January 2016, her little brother was living with us. Because he was going to university, he was going to Unilag, which is like 5 minutes away. So it made sense for him to stay with us. But he was like 17. So right off the bat, we never really had like a honeymoon. We never enjoyed ourselves. You understand how newlyweds are supposed to be? Where you have like a year or two where you just enjoy each other's company. Because no matter how, even if you lived together before, which we had, it's never the same after you get married. You need to sort of rediscover each other. You need to become friends in a new kind of way. You're merging finances. There are a lot of things you haven't really done before. And all of a sudden, it's like you now have this added layer of difficulty. Because instead of worrying about finances for 2, for example, you're worrying about finances for 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Because there was a bit of an economic situation from our families, and at a point, she was the only one working in our family. So there's a mother, a father, and there's 3 kids, and she was the only one working.
Yeah.
At a point, it got better, but at a point, that's what it was. So we, by Nigerian standards at the time, we actually weren't doing bad. So as I said, I was making like 160k, which was a decent sum of money to make in 2015.
At the time.
She was making 99,000,
okay,
which wasn't bad. So altogether, we were doing like 250k a month then. That was pretty good. That was well over $1,000. We were doing pretty well.
At the time, yeah.
But instead of worrying about 2 people, we're taking care of like 5 or 6 people. It was always a struggle. We're always fighting about money. In fact, on the divorce papers, you will see evidence of that. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to show you, but you'll see evidence of we're always fighting and always
but
talking
at
about
what
money.
point, though, did you have that gut feeling? Because you mentioned that you had the gut feeling. You knew, your spidey sense, you knew that this marriage was about to come to an end. At what point did you know that?
I guess there were 3 major checkpoints. The first one was when my dad died.
Okay.
So my dad died on Saturday. Bear in mind, even though I didn't have a relationship with my mom, I definitely had a relationship with my dad. My dad was my hero. I loved that man to death with all his flaws. But he just went in a very traumatizing way that he did. Yes. I think you've seen this.
You mentioned, yeah.
So that happened on a Saturday. I was in between jobs at the time because I was just about to start. I just got my contract at Channels TV. So I just left. I was working at a digital agency called ADE. I just left. I was about to resume my new job at Channels, July 2017. So that the following week, I wasn't going to work or anything. I was at home and I felt violently sick that week. I mean, I just watched my dad die. It messed with my mind and I fell ill, basically. And I remember I think it was a Wednesday that week. She had gone to work and she came back. I remember it was raining, it was drizzling. And she came back from work and I was on the sofa in the living room. I couldn't move. Like when I fall ill like that, it doesn't matter what the sickness is, I always get a sore throat. My sinus goes haywire. And that's like one of the worst things that can happen to me. I become useless. So I was there, I was sweaty, my sinus was on fire, I couldn't swallow everything, and I was bleeding. Like, can you please cross the road? So there was a pharmacy just across the road to get me Activate. That was it. And she threw this almighty tantrum. Can I not see that it's raining outside? Can I not see that it's going to mess up her hair? Why am I always stressing her? Blah, 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 blah. Why am I... Wait, hang on. No, I'm getting there. Like, why am I being so pathetic that am I the first person to lose my father? And no one had ever spoken to me like that before. Am I the first person to lose my... Like, I've never lost anyone before.
Insensitive.
And she goes, am I the first person to lose my father? It was like that. Dong. That was the first time something came off in my head that, did I make a huge mistake here? Am I supposed to be here? Who is this person? The second time was a few months after that. We're in the same, we're just about to move out of that apartment building. The context here was that we're the youngest couple. There were 5 couples in that apartment building, and we're the youngest by far, like maybe a decade younger than the next. And we had the best car in the building. We looked like we're having the absolute time of our lives, even though we weren't. But to Bariga people, we looked like yuppies, right? So they didn't like us. We didn't particularly like them either. And it just so happened that this particular day, this couple downstairs, they had a special needs child. And I don't know what the matter with him was, but we just heard this loud knock on our door. This was like 11:30 p.m. And so I put on my jalabia and I went to answer the door. Like, what's up? And it was someone else it was a couple, it was another couple. The husband came to say, that they need my car. And this couple, the kids, his name was Corey, I can't forget. That Corey is not breathing. They need to rush him to the hospital. There's this hospital in Bagada called Arjola. I don't know if you know. If you live in Lagos, you'd know it. So I went back to the bedroom to get my slippers and whatnot. She's like, "Where are you going?" I told her that they need to rush Corey to the hospital, and she's like, why are we the only ones who had a car? Why is it us they came to ask? I'm like, yeah, but a kid is dying. Let's deal with that later. She's like, no, I shouldn't go. And she was really insistent that I shouldn't go. Like, she really meant it. And for that was one of the few times I did that. I actually pulled rank. And no, I'm going. Normally I would cave in. But this one I was like, no. Like, for the sake of human, what's it called? Like, come on now.
Yeah.
The child is dying.
Empathy.
And the kid actually died, by the way.
That same night?
Yeah, the kid died.
Before you got a chance to get to the hospital?
Oh, no. We got the kid to the hospital and everything. Okay. And the kid was pronounced dead at the hospital. And it was so sad because the parents couldn't even afford to put the kid into the morgue. So we literally drove back to the house with a dead kid in my back seat. The parents were Muslims, so they had, they go bury the child before, Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But I remember thinking to that was the second time, this is not a very kind person.
Right.
And then the third time, when I realized that, okay, something is definitely wrong here, so I think I just finished a season of The Other News. The Other News was a show I used to work on at Channels TV. So I just finished a season. I was in between seasons. And how it works is that you're not an employee, you're a contractor. So once you're out of season, they stop paying you.
Yeah.
So when you're in season, you're getting paid very well by Nigerian standards. So in 2018, it was 400k a month, which was not bad then. But I was in between seasons, so it was like a month of nothing, or 2 months. I always do copywriting and I do Upwork gigs and stuff on the side. So it wasn't as if I wasn't bringing in any money, but it wasn't as much as normal. And she had a problem with that. And then apparently she had this whole thing where she had this colleague at work who was also married, had a child or whatnot. And this is what I mean about being young and impressionable. Apparently this colleague was in an unhappy marriage with a man who wasn't really pulling his weight. And this colleague managed to convince her that somehow that's what I was turning into. And it became a whole thing at home. Why are you putting our business outside? Like, if we're having financial trouble, why are you going to work and telling this colleague of yours? And then this colleague of yours is projecting her husband's feelings onto me. Like, what the hell? And what made it even more ridiculous for me is that, I mean, you and I know the kind of history we have. You and I know that, like, between I'm atheist, but you are Christian, very much so, very Pentecostal, right? So between you and the God you claim to believe in, you know that the number of things I've done for your family, you know, right? And I'm not just saying that. There was a time when they were literally getting kicked out, like, because of rent. They were literally getting kicked out. I remember I had just got confirmed at work then. The money I was planning to use to move out of my parents' house, I literally I remember, because then I didn't have the Zenith Bank. I had the Zenith Bank app on my phone, but it was restricted to 100,000 naira a day.
Yeah, transfer limit.
So I didn't tell anyone at work where I was going. I didn't say I didn't take any permission to leave. I just slipped out, grabbed my keys, went to the car. I drove to the Zenith Bank at Allen, and I did a desk transfer. I had like 480,000 in my accounts. I left like 80k in there. I cleaned out everything else, sent it to her mom, and they paid their rent. Like, they got a new place and they paid the rent. That was just one instance. There were so many other things I did. There was a time her dad was, because apparently he was a contractor, he wanted to do some project in Delta State. I think he did stadium tartan tracks or something. And he needed to wet the ground. If you know what that, if you get what I'm saying. I needed some money, I didn't have it. And they wanted me to take out a loan from rent money. And I did. Yeah, I carried my pay slip, I went to rent money, I took out a loan, $250,000 naira, and I handed it over. There you go. And there were so many other things. I mean, at a point, apart from my little brother, her mom also came to stay with us. At a point, And inside all of this, her mom was just constantly inside her ear.
Right.
Constantly in her ear. Because her mom's marriage obviously was not a very happy one either. The man used to beat her.
Yes.
So I think her mom had this thing that men are this. And then her mom was just constantly in her ear, talking about men. And I'm like, dude, we know each other. I'm not men. Like, you know me. Where is this coming from? But again, that's what happens when you're young and you've not really discovered who you are yet. And you have people constantly in your ear.
Yeah.
Telling you who you are and telling you who your husband is.
Yes. I think you've made a very important point, because at that age, it's hard to actually say who you are. I remember when I was growing up, I used to say at the age of 21, I wanted to be married.
Big mistake.
I thank God.
Big mistake.
I thank God that
you'd either have been divorced, a single mom, or unhappy.
I know, because between then and now, 8 years, I would say, it's been a lot of development, growth, and all of that. Now I can say, I think I'm still growing, but to a large extent, I can say there are certain things that won't get to me. It doesn't matter who my colleague is, what she's telling me
Your
about my
personality
husband.
is more fully
It's
formed.
it's formed, you know. So you made a very important point, but just to backtrack a little bit, you talked about cheating, discovering that this person cheated on you and all of that. But in your book, there was a part that wasn't so clear to me. You talked about sneaky links a lot.
Oh yeah.
So, and trying to reconcile the time frame, it felt like you were having this sneaky link even when the first marriage was subsisting.
No.
Okay, no, it was after.
Afterwards, I became an absolute playboy.
Okay.
Absolute, like I'm not even denying that. Like, so we split September 2018,
Okay.
and I just went to town. Basically, that's the
You
truth.
entered the street.
I absolutely, like, I hit the street. I was outside for the next, I don't know, 3 years.
3 years. Okay. So, but let's move to the most, for me, I don't know about others if you read the book, but for me, the most interesting part of your book, especially because of what I do, is the chapter on the Okija woman.
Yes.
Chapter 5.
Yeah.
Now, what was it about this person? Especially because you had this midnight call that dragged on, and that was the first time you were speaking to this person. Yeah. It was on that call you proposed to her.
Yeah.
Please tell me, for the love of God, what was it that attracted you to this person?
So there are two things. So you remember how I said I am an astoundingly sentimental person, which is not a good thing because it interferes with your judgment a lot.
It can be good and bad.
It interferes with your judgment a lot. So sometimes even in my professional life, in my journalism and whatnot, I actually have to sort of call myself out, like, bro, you're doing too much. Sometimes I actually have to do that.
Okay.
You know, one of the things you are taught when you're in school is that you should never get emotionally involved in your work. You should never get emotionally involved in your stories. I get emotionally involved in a lot of my stories. Because to me, it's not just work. It's not just a thing that I'm presenting to the audience. I feel like I have to manage this thing from end to end. Like, for example, the lady who died in Cote d'Ivoire, what's her name? Itinu Babalova. I carried her matter on my head. I went way beyond where a journalist is supposed to get involved. I was sending her money, like my personal funds. I was like talking to her family, like I was acting like a government liaison. You know, I was speaking to, sending messages to the Oyo State Speaker of the Speaker of the Oyo State House of Assembly and whatnot. I was doing things that I really had no business doing because that's how I am. I'm a very sentimental person. So when something catches me, it's very bad. It's one of the reasons why, well, this isn't necessarily about being sentimental, but I guess it's the personality type that I have. It's one of the reasons why the things that other people tried in university, for example, like everybody smoked weed once or twice. I never tried it once. Everybody has had a cigarette before. I've never had one. Everybody used to drink and whatnot. I drink once or twice a year. And it's a glass and that's it. Yeah. Because I know the kind of person I am. Once I'm into something, I the hair go, I know the hair come. I know myself. That's how I am. So that's one thing.
To this person.
Now, this was then compounded by the second thing, which I think is the more important thing here. And it is that, so last year when I was in Edinburgh, I had a conversation with a therapist. Right? I'd never been to therapy before in my life. And I wasn't going there to sit on the couch and wail, oh my God, I'm a broken person, fix me. No. But I felt like I needed to find out some things. That why do I keep doing certain things? Why is this happening? And based on what this therapist, well, based on the outcome of the conversation I had with this therapist, I came to the understanding that because of the very dysfunctional relationship that I had with my mom, and the fact that boys, generally speaking, tend to be very attached to their mothers, right? But because in my case, I mean, I was a normal boy, but my mom absolutely was not a normal mother, right? So I never had that attachment. I never had that that affection or anything like that. So basically what the therapist said is, what is that you are trying to use your romantic partnerships as ways to psychologically fix that damaged, non-existent relationship that you had with your mom. So as a result of that, you look for projects. You look for people who you think subconsciously need fixing. Like wounded puppies. You look for them. It's like you don't realize that you're doing it, but you do it. Because that, like, when you feel like you are nurturing them back to life, you're actually healing a part of yourself.
Yeah, makes sense.
Those two factors collided in the worst possible way. Because she was the quintessential hurt puppy. I'm not going to identify her. I'm not going to say who she is. I'm not going to do any of that. So no, don't bother asking me. But let's just say she had a very sad backstory, which I was sort of vaguely aware of. And then it also didn't help that she was very physically attractive.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a very visually led person as well. And for whatever reason, the fact
Sorry
that...
to cut you short. So that means this is someone you had seen. It wasn't just the call that night.
Oh, no, I'd seen her.
Okay.
Like, I was aware of this person. It's
Okay.
just... In fact, part of the reason why I guess I had never really bothered to even, like, have a conversation with this person, because I was like, what the hell am I going to do with that? Like,
Okay.
how is it going to work? You understand? So if you know this story about how Dr. Dre once said that that Michael Jackson and Prince wanted to work with him, and he turned them down because he thought, what am I going to do with them? Like, I know rich.
Exactly.
That's how I felt about her. Like, whatever, I beg. Me, I'm in exile, and then like, how is it going to work? Please, I beg. Let me not complicate my life and her own. So I never bothered.
Yeah.
But she was the one who sort of delivered herself gift wrapped to me, and it was a lot of things.
Yeah.
It was very it was good for my ego. It was very self-affirming, and then it was the raw emotional power of it. Oh my goodness, it was so intoxicating. Like,
Let me read something from your book to buttress this intoxication, if you don't mind.
Right.
We got back to my place, and the first 48 hours passed by in a blur of passionate love making. Not sex, love making. I don't know what the difference is. It was emotionally intense and heated. It was tearful and meaningful.
Oh my God, David.
It was physically unbelievable. I barely remember anything else that happened during the first 2 days. It was the single most powerful physical and emotional experience. Guys, listen, if you haven't read Breaking Points, you are sleeping. Better wake up. I know this is a part of David you guys do not know, but David wrote this. It's not every time politics and Indaboski. Guys, go and read that book. So this is just to buttress, what you said about intoxicating. Looking back on that night, I want to ask you a question. Do you think, I know what your therapist said, but looking back, do you think it was really love, or just, I don't know, youthful? Because if you even take the example of your first marriage, I feel like it was the same thing. You're quick, I feel like you're quick to, enter, commit, and all of that. So do you think it was really love, or it's just David being David, just proposing in that call and already planning the future?
I don't think love is a thing that is like a yes or no thing, like flip a switch and it's 0 or 1. I think love is a thing that builds up over time. I think love is a series of choices, decisions. So I don't think you can look at someone and say, I love that person, and it's just abstractly true. No, I think it's something that has to be proven. So I don't think it's possible to have just met someone or to have just entered a relationship with someone and to say that you love them. You can't possibly know that yet.
Okay, so that night it wasn't. So what was it for you then? When she said, are you not going to, maybe, I don't know.
I don't think, so
again,
I think the mistake you're making is that you're thinking that you would only go that far with someone because you love them.
That's
But
how I would imagine it.
no, what I'm saying is even if you've put a ring on someone's finger, even if you've gotten married, except maybe you've been with the person for a long enough time to have made that judgment, how could you possibly know?
How long is long enough though? Like when you say except you've been with the person for what is that time frame?
So my first marriage, if you include the time we spent on marriage together, altogether, this was 5 years. And at the end of the 5 years, I realized I never really knew this person as well as I thought I did. So yeah, I told her I loved her every day, but did I really, or was I, or did I love what I thought she was?
Right.
So again, I think love is a very treacherous conversation.
It's deep. I agree.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say with Okija woman as I almost said that. Jeez. I wouldn't say with her it was love because I couldn't possibly have known at that point. And she also said she loved me, by the way, but she also couldn't possibly have known.
I agree.
I think when people say things like that at that point in their relationship, I think it's a statement of hope or it's a promissory statement. I don't think they can possibly know.
No.
For sure.
So the night you spoke with this person and giving your explanation, right, about wanting to fix a person who looks broken, do you think that was it for you in that moment? Because in your book, you really did not lay the foundation or provide a context. You said you were already aware of this person, but that's like a vague statement. You did not provide any context for the reader to understand in what environment or under what circumstances you were aware of this person. So what was it really? What was that relationship, between you and this person? I know you guys had not really, I don't know if you guys had interacted before then, but you said she reached out. So what was this context in which you were already aware of this person? What was it for you? How did you know? How did you sense she was
struggling to
broken?
answer? I'm struggling to answer the question because answering that question accurately might identify her.
Okay.
I don't want to do that. So let's just say that again, she's someone who had a bit of a tragic backstory, which I was vaguely aware of at that point. Like I knew who she was, we had just never spoken before.
Okay.
And I'd had the opportunity actually to speak to her, but I just didn't bother because why would I complicate her life and mine by doing that? But when she reached out to me, then I thought, okay, so she actually thinks I'm worth the complication then. Okay, let's do this. So maybe the way I presented it in the book made it seem as if this person just dropped out of the sky.
Exactly.
That's not exactly true. She was someone that I was sort of aware of. She was there in my subconscious somewhere, but I just never acted on it.
All right.
Because I didn't think that there was any point. So the minute there was an opportunity, I went for it immediately. There was no question. I went for it instantly.
There are two points you made. So you've addressed the first one. The second point you made was about not being able to remove sentiment and emotions from your work. So I don't need you to answer because you've already said that's something you don't really want to talk about. But it's giving me this, to use your own words, spidey sense that this is something that might have occurred in the course of your work. You don't need to confirm anything, but it's just giving me that feeling because you mentioned it right before you answered the question about what you found attractive about her. But I'll leave it there.
No. So, but to be fair, I think you can even see it in the type of work that I do and the way that I do the work that I do. The way I go to extents that nobody else is really willing to.
So you're confirming then that you being aware of this person was like something that occurred in a work context and in the course of your work?
No, actually, funny enough, no. Not that. I was making a more general comment about just how I approach life in general. Like you can see it in the way I go after things. That I'm like a dog with a bone. Where ordinary people just do a job and move on, or they look at something and they lose interest. Me, I don't forget, I don't move on. It's once it's in my head, it's in my head. And I can't let it go. I can't stop thinking about it until something definite has happened. Which, by the way, also turned out to be a problem later on. And it was time to move on from her. And I really couldn't. Because in my mind, exactly, in my mind, it's all about what if, if only.
Yeah.
How about, and that's how my mind works.
Yeah. I found something recurring though, especially the information you gave just some minutes ago was not in your book. You said you discovered that in your first marriage, she cheated on you. And despite that discovery, you still went ahead to marry her.
Which was a mistake, because I'll be honest with you, I thought I'd gotten over it, but at the point when we split up is when I realized I'd never really got over it.
Right, and that record, in my opinion, with the Okija woman, because in the book, this is really sensitive information, and thanks for being that vulnerable in those pages. You shared that you were abused, right? Physical abuse. So this occurred even before.
I actually don't like the word abuse, because it makes me sound like I was somewhere in a corner crying when something was happening to me. I was attacked.
You were attacked.
I was physically attacked multiple times.
Yes. And this happened before the wedding.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, why, despite that experience, did you decide to go ahead with the wedding?
Well, this is something you will, I mean, hopefully you won't, but this is something that if you ever come across someone who struggles with a personality disorder, be it a bipolar person, be it someone with borderline personality disorder, be it someone with schizophrenia, because they're all in the same ecosystem, right? Once they are over their manic phase, right, when they are destroying stuff, right? Once they're over that, then they enter their depressive state. You literally just want to wrap them up in silk and protect them, because then they become so vulnerable and so soft, and it's like everything they've done starts to sink in. And in that moment, you feel like the worst person in the world if you're trying to hold them accountable for what they've done. Because at that moment, it feels as if they're actually willing to just commit suicide to atone for what they've done. Right? Like, so at that point, it's very easy to mistake what you are seeing for some sort of significant long-term behavioral change. It's not. It's just a depressive state, and it's temporary. But again, you have to bear in mind, I did not know this. I knew nothing about this. Technically I grew up with someone who had a similar kind of issue, my mom. But again, I didn't know what it was. There was no medical diagnosis. There was nothing.
Yeah.
So, and even my mom, she had a few similar traits, but she was very high functioning. Very, compared to this, she was very high functioning. She wasn't going around holding a knife to her throat or anything like that.
Yeah.
She was very high functioning. So I had never seen anything like this before. It was outside of my scope of reference. I had read about it in books. I had seen it in movies, Nollywood movies. The woman that wakes up and pours boiling oil on her husband, that kind of thing. But it seems like something that Ugezu dreamt up. It doesn't seem like something that will happen to you.
Oh my goodness.
Especially in the situation I was in there, because bear in mind, at this point, so I was in Ghana. I was I was living in hiding. People didn't have access to me, right? And at that point, I just started West Africa Weekly then as a Substack newsletter.
Yeah.
And what West Africa Weekly went on to become in terms of the kind of stories it took on,
and the impact,
and the kind of influence it had.
Yeah.
So at that point, I was actually in a very dangerous situation in my professional space, and I had let this person into my personal space. And she just, it was like letting a grenade. It was like taking the pin off a grenade and throwing it into your bedroom. And you're thinking, what am I supposed to do now? There was no frame of reference, and I was alone. I didn't have a counselor or anything. My family, they're in Nigeria. All my friends had, if you read the book, the few friends I had there, they had all disappeared. Bruno had left. I think she went to the US for a while. Indy went back to Abuja with Paul. Ralph left Accra. My friend Lawrence, I think he went to Zurich. So it was just me and my nightmare. And I was just alone. I didn't know. And then in that kind of situation, bear in mind, there's also the added layer of difficulty of being a man in that situation. Because who the fuck is going to believe you in the first place? If you call them and tell them, hey, I'm a battered husband.
No, but David, you experienced some of this, right? Before the wedding. And you mentioned that you spoke with your auntie. And
her solution was very simple. Oh, send her back to Nigeria. Put her in place, send her back to Nigeria.
Call off the wedding.
That's a very simple, that's very easy to say.
And maybe to do, especially because you are not committed.
You are living in the same house with this person.
And then she was visiting.
No, so we had done the trad. At that point, we hadn't done the court wedding. Okay. We had done the traditional wedding. So in the manner I was speaking, we were actually married. In the eyes of our family, we were married.
Because I kept screaming like, David, why you're not married yet? Why don't you like?
Technically, we already were.
Yeah,
we just hadn't formalized this with the registry thing. But in the eyes of our family, they had done the wine carrying and everything. We were married.
And maybe you could have returned the bride price and ask them for the bride price.
Again, you talk like it's so simple. In that situation, what was I going to do? Because amidst all of this, she does not want to go back. So what are you now going to do? Tell her, and I think someone that you spend the past how many weeks telling this person every day that you love them, you die for them, this one, that one. You are then supposed to all of a sudden just do this and just be like,
understand it's not easy.
How? I was in an impossible situation. And I'm not like saying, oh, poor little me, that's not what I'm saying at all, because again, I don't really do self-pity. But to be honest, there wasn't really, like, I look back on it and I can't really see how things could possibly have been any different.
All right. But in chapter 14 of your book, I think there was a time where you guys had this space that she returned, and in chapter 14 you mentioned you got back together.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
David, why?
It goes back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, that regular people have the ability to be superficial. That is a gift. And it's a gift that I was not given at birth. Regular people have the ability to look at something and look away. Have the ability to get with someone, break up, and move on. These are precious gifts that I was not given. Because me, once I am involved emotionally with anyone or anything, it's like there is a string tied to my soul.
You're fixated.
And this is not just about women, by the way. This is anything I have an emotional connection with. I can tell you, for example, so let me think of a random example. The school I enjoyed going to the most when I was a teenager, it was called Oxbridge Tutorial College. It was a sixth form college. So I went there between 2005 and 2007. The day my last day at Oxbridge, which was, there wasn't a valedictory service. It was the last day of my A-level exams, right? This was in 2007. I can tell you everything that happened that day. I can tell you what we were wearing. I can recall bits of conversation. I can recall who laughed, how. Like, my brain does not, for anything that is some sort of treasured memory, or there is an emotional attachment to that thing, I don't know how to let it go.
All right.
So in her case, after a few months apart, because after the initial thing, because I was angry when she inferred that she was seeing someone in Lagos, I was like, well, fuck you then, and the pride took over, which was useful, but it only takes me so far. So the pride took over for like 2-3 months. 3-4 months since, like April, and then out of nothing, you just check her Twitter one day or something, and then she maybe tweets something random, and then you start reading meaning into things, reading meanings that are not actually there.
Yeah.
So she made. I remember there was a particular tweet she made where she was talking about. Oh yeah, there was a time in between when she visited and when she came back after the trad wedding. She had this episode where we fought over the phone, and then she was like, she's done with all of this. She's going to join a convent. She's going to become a nun. Yada yada yada. So I remember sometime in 2022, I think it was April or so, she made a tweet talking about how one time when she had a quarrel with her man, and she said she was going to join a convent. Yada yada yada. And obviously I assumed she was referring to me. So in my mind I'm thinking, wow, she's still thinking about me. Much later on, actually, when I sort of stylishly raised that in conversation, when she actually came to Accra, she was like, oh, she was actually talking about me. Because that actually happened before, apparently. Apparently it's a normal thing we have. Whenever she has a quarrel with a boyfriend or whatever, she threatens to not become a nun. I didn't know that. So, but I was just sort of putting 2 and 2 and getting 22, like building castles in the air.
Yeah.
And when my mind starts like that, it will not stop. It won't stop. I will just keep fixating. Now, what if? What if? What if? For me, the most tortured position to be in is to have an unresolved question, or to have an unresolved possibility in my mind. It's one of the reasons why I even attack my work the way I do. Because, like, my nightmare is to be lying down in bed and I can't sleep because I'm thinking, what if I could have done more?
Yeah.
What if I had just put in a bit more effort? If I had just
Right.
So regular people, as I said, have the ability to switch off. Regular people have the ability to lie down in bed and within 10 minutes they've closed their eyes and they've gone. I would lie down in bed and literally I'm there for 2 hours. I'm not with my phone or anything. I'm just there and my thoughts are just buffeting me and I'm just thinking. Like, it's an actual struggle. It's a wonder that I've never had to use sleeping pills or something, and I suspect at some point in life that may actually become a possibility. Because I don't know how to let things go. I'm a very intense person.
So this is why you were willing to like explore with her a second time, more like a second chance.
Yeah.
Because of the hope, of what could be.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, but before we wrap up with this part, in the next part we'll talk about the child that never was, which I think is the crux of your book, The Breaking Point. But before we wrap up, you mentioned, in quote, the other girlfriend. So before you got talking with the Okija woman, there was a girlfriend in the picture.
Yeah.
And you were even planning, I think, a trip for her to come see you. In Ghana. So
it wasn't official. We were talking stage, whatever.
Okay, it wasn't like girlfriend, just
we
still
weren't
talking
really
stage.
dating.
So what was the excuse, or what was the communication like with her when you decided, okay, you were going to focus on the Okija woman?
I was kind of honest with her. I told her, I'm getting serious with someone now.
Oh my God, my chest. And that was it. How did she
Pretty
take
much. To be honest, I don't really know, because I was so wrapped up in what I was getting into that however it was she was going to react or what she was feeling at that moment, I had the ability to sort of tune the volume down.
Yeah.
So, to be fair, I don't think she really made much of a fuss about it, because as I said, we weren't really involved like that.
But have you ever, did you talk again after then?
Oh yeah, we did.
Did you think
we
maybe I made a mistake?
Oh yeah, I did a whole apology thing,
Okay.
and I actually made it up to her. Like, I'm not gonna say what I did, but I
Shay.
more than made it up to her.
All right.
So.
Okay, we've come to the end of this part. Thank you very much for the time that you have spared and for being here. I really appreciate. So in the next part, we're going to be talking about the crux of the book, The Breaking Point.
Yeah.
what really broke you, you know? Guys, don't miss that part. Stay tuned. In fact, it's going to be more, what's the word? Expository. Is that it? Than and this first part. So until when next we meet, bye.
Young in